The most powerful man in China was afraid of dying. He had unified 6 kingdoms in 11 years. He had ended 5 centuries of war. He had built roads across 3 million square miles, standardized currency for 300 million people, created a single written script that allowed opposite ends of a continent to communicate. He had commanded the construction of walls stretching thousands of miles across the northern frontier. He had done what no one in Chinese history had ever done, and he was absolutely terrified that all of it would end. His name was Ying Zheng. History knows him as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. And in the years after his greatest triumph, he made a decision that would kill him. He decided not to die. To understand what drove him to this obsession, you need to understand the world that produced him, and what it had cost him to build the one he left behind. When Ying Zheng became king of the Qin state at the age of 13, China was not China. It was a collection of 7 warring kingdoms that had been fighting each other for supremacy for nearly 3 centuries, the Warring States period. One of the most brutal eras in human history, had consumed generations of lives in battles that produced no lasting result. Kingdoms rose, kingdoms fell. Alliances formed and shattered. Millions died. No one could win. No one could stop. Ying Zheng won, and he stopped it. In a campaign of extraordinary military and administrative coordination, the Qin state defeated the Han Kingdom in 230 BC. Then the Zhao, then the Wei, then the Chu, the Yan, and finally the Qi in 221 BC. In 11 years, everything fell. For the first time in Chinese history, a single ruler controlled all of what we now call China. He gave himself a title that had never existed before, Huangdi, Emperor, the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. What he built afterward was staggering. Roads extending thousands of miles, designed for rapid movement of armies and commerce. A standardized script so that a merchant from the far south could read a document written in the far north. Unified weights, unified measures, unified currency. Sections of the Great Wall connected and extended across the northern frontier, creating a barrier that would define the edge of the civilized world for centuries. A new capital at Xianyang designed to receive tribute from every corner of the earth. He built more in 2 decades than most dynasties accomplished in centuries. And he could not stop thinking about death. The court records from this period describe a man increasingly consumed by a single fear. He forbade the word death from being spoken in his presence. He moved between his palaces unpredictably. He had nearly 700 palaces connected by covered walkways so that he could travel without appearing in the open, because he believed death could not find him if death did not know where he was. He was surrounded at all times by people who had every reason to tell him whatever he wanted to hear. The court philosopher Li Si warned him against outside ideas. He had hundreds of scholars executed for discussing Confucian texts that questioned his methods. He burned the books. Not all books. The agricultural manuals survived. The medical texts survived. But the philosophical and historical texts that might undermine his authority. The scholars who protested were buried alive. History records that he buried 460 of them in a single event. This is the man who built one of the most sophisticated states the ancient world had ever produced. This is also the man who turned that sophistication toward the elimination of doubt. In 219 BC, hope arrived in the form of a Taoist alchemist named Zhu Fu. He appeared before the emperor and described a group of magical islands far out in the Eastern Sea, a place the ancient texts called Penglai, home to immortal beings who possessed the secret of eternal life. The immortals were there, Zhu Fu said. The elixir existed. He just needed ships and supplies and several thousand young people to assist with the voyage. Qin Shi Huang gave him everything. According to the historical record, Zhu Fu sailed east with 3,000 young men and women, skilled craftspeople, seeds, tools, and enough provisions for a long voyage. He never returned. Some historians believe Zhu Fu reached Japan. There are Japanese communities that claim descent from his crew. There are coastal legends in Japan about a Chinese navigator who arrived with thousands of followers. Whether this is historical truth or the accumulation of folklore around a genuine mystery, Zhu Fu sailed into the Eastern Sea and was never seen again by anyone who reported back to the emperor. Qin Shi Huang sent more expeditions. All failed. The islands could not be found, or excuses were made, or the ships returned empty. The external source of immortality was not available, so the emperor turned inward. He turned to his court alchemists. In the ancient Chinese understanding of chemistry and medicine, mercury occupied a special position. Liquid silver, cinnabar. The brilliant red ore from which mercury was refined had been associated with immortality and transformation for centuries. The alchemical texts described mercury as a bridge between mortal matter and divine permanence. Properly prepared, consumed in the right quantities under the right conditions, it was said to purify the body, halt the aging process, and, if the dosage was exactly right, extend life indefinitely. The alchemists told the emperor this. He believed them. He began consuming mercury compounds, small doses at first, then larger. His court encouraged it. No one in a position of power tells the most powerful man in the world that his favorite medicine is killing him. The changes in his behavior in his final years are documented in the court records, and when read through the lens of what we now know about chronic mercury poisoning, they are unmistakable. Increasing paranoia. Already present but now extreme. Violent and unpredictable mood swings. Deteriorating judgment, once remarkable, now erratic. He turned against advisors who had served him faithfully for decades. He issued orders that contradicted each other. He became convinced of plots that did not exist and invented enemies among his closest circle. He was poisoning his own brain, slowly, with the medicine he had chosen to make himself immortal. In 210 BC, on a tour of the Eastern Territories, still searching, still hoping for news of the elixir, still convinced the islands might be reached if the right ship went in the right direction, Qin Shi Huang died. He was 49 years old, the most powerful man in the world, dead of the cure he had chosen. What happened next is one of the more remarkable episodes in ancient history. He died far from the capital, in the company of a very small number of officials. His chief minister Li Si and the eunuch Zhao Gao made an immediate decision: conceal the death. They continued issuing edicts in the emperor's name. They accepted incoming documents and composed replies as if he were alive, reading everything, still in command. The imperial procession began the long journey back to the capital. But it was summer, and the emperor's body was decomposing in the carriage. Li Si ordered the solution. Carts of salted fish, enough salted fish to supply a market, were positioned immediately behind the imperial carriage, traveling with it the entire return journey. The smell of the rotting fish masked the smell of the rotting emperor. The procession of the greatest empire in Asia moved through the summer heat with its dead ruler at the center, preserved in the odor of the sea. They held the deception until they reached the capital and arranged the succession. Then they announced the death. He was buried in a tomb that had been under construction for 37 years, begun when he was 13 years old and became king. The historian Sima Qian, writing 1 century later, described what lay inside: a scale reproduction of the entire empire, with all its rivers and oceans rendered in flowing liquid mercury, kept perpetually in motion by mechanical systems. Mechanical crossbows rigged to fire automatically at any intruder who disturbed the chamber. The constellations mapped on the ceiling in gems. Treasures beyond any accounting. Mercury. The rivers of his model empire were made of mercury. The same substance he had consumed trying to become immortal surrounded him in death. Modern scientists have measured the mercury levels in the soil directly above the burial mound. They are significantly and anomalously elevated, highest in the areas that correspond to where Sima Qian described the rivers and seas. The tomb has never been fully opened. The mercury levels inside would make excavation extremely hazardous. What lies beneath that mound remains one of the great unseen wonders of human archaeology. And around the tomb, discovered in 1974 by farmers digging a well, the Terracotta Army. 8,000 life-sized soldiers in clay, each with an individual face, arranged in battle formation in underground chambers. The army the emperor commissioned to protect him in the afterlife. One of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. Here is what stays with you. Qin Shi Huang achieved something almost no human being achieves. He actually changed the world. The political entity he created unified China under a single administration, a single law, a single script, was not destroyed by his death. It survived him. It survived the dynasty that replaced his. It survived 2,000 years of subsequent history. The concept of China as one nation, one people, one civilization. That is, in no small part, his creation. The borders shifted, the dynasties changed, but the idea held. and he spent the last decade of his life in paralyzing terror of the one thing he could not control. He drank mercury because he had the power to try anything, and he could not accept that his power had a limit. He poisoned his own mind and body with the medicine he ordered because no one around him could tell him the truth. He died at 49, younger than many of the people watching this video, trying to be the one human being who would not have to stop. The man who built an empire that lasted 2,000 years could not buy himself 10 more years of life. Remember that. The next time someone with enormous power tells you they have found the answer to something no one has ever solved before, ask what they're drinking.